Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Liverpool Leaders event. I'm Susie Thompson. I'm the Director of Development and Alumni Relations for the university. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. For some of you, this might be the first time that you have dialed into one of these events, so a little bit of background on this series. It's intended to shine a light on the many University of Liverpool alumni who are leading in their field. In previous discussions, we have heard from the Chairman and Chief Executive of the Coca-Cola Company, James Quincy, the Chief Executive of UK and Ireland for IBM, Nicola Hodson, and our brand new Chancellor, Judge Wendy Beetlestone. All have been fascinating and insightful discussions touching on leadership, personal values, and some really great stories of their time at Liverpool. If you missed any of those earlier discussions and you'd like to catch up, they are all available on our website. Today, we are honoured to be joined by our new Vice-Chancellor, Professor Tim Jones, and importantly, alumnus of the university. This is the first chance that many in your alumni community will have had the chance to hear from Tim, and we're very grateful that he's given up his time to be with us today. You've got the chance to ask questions, so please do post your questions in that Q&A box in the bottom of your screen there, and my colleague Andy Harrison and I will be putting your questions to the Vice-Chancellor at the end of the main session. But before we hear from Tim, I would like to briefly introduce our interviewer for today, Professor Rasmita Raval. Rasmita is a professor in chemistry and the director of the Interdisciplinary Surface Science Research Centre at the University of Liverpool. She is a truly interdisciplinary scientist who works across physics and chemistry and life sciences. The main theme that runs through this broad research platform is molecular nanoscience. Her research is inspired by the natural world, and in 2014, this interest took her to explore the world of bacteria and viruses. During this scientific detour, she became passionate about driving knowledge-based innovation. She is the founder and director of the Open Innovation Hub for Microbial Surfaces, Antimicrobial Surfaces, I should say, and she's one of the 4 co-founders and co-directors of the UK National Biofilms Innovation Centre. Working closely with industry, her innovation team focus on the rapid translation of research into real-world technologies. They currently work with over 150 multinational companies and SMEs across multiple technology sectors, but also healthcare stakeholders and regional, national, and international agencies. This is science that has a huge impact across many areas. For example, when companies want to develop new coatings to reduce the spread of infection, or to develop surfaces which are self-cleaning, or when the Gates Foundation want to evaluate new coatings on their malaria nets, it is Professor Raval and her team that they choose to work with. Rasmita, thank you so much for agreeing to be our host today, and I will now hand things over to you.
Thank you, Susie, for your kind introduction. So good evening. Welcome to our audience today. It is my great pleasure to introduce today's Liverpool leader, our new Vice-Chancellor, Professor Tim Jones, who took up his position on the 1st of January of this year. So let me start by giving a brief introduction to Tim's illustrious career. Tim is in fact an alumnus of the university. He gained both his undergraduate degree in chemistry and then his PhD at Liverpool. He then went on to carve a very successful research career as an academic and as a scientist. His first tenured position was at Imperial College London, where he spent 17 years. And then he was attracted to the chemistry department at Warwick as part of their strategic investment in advanced materials research. During this time, Tim forged an international research profile in the field of surface science, and his specific focus was on advanced electronic materials with applications in exciting areas such as photovoltaics. These are really challenging technologies, where performance is dictated by surface and interface properties, often at the nanoscale. It was at Warwick that Tim began his transition from academic leadership to institutional leadership, holding a number of senior leadership positions. These included Pro Vice-Chancellor for Science, Engineering, and Medicine, and Pro Vice-Chancellor for Research, Knowledge Transfer, and Business Engagement. He then moved to the University of Birmingham, where he was appointed Provost and Vice Principal from 2016. In addition to all these demanding roles, Tim has undertaken several external roles in research and innovation, including being a board member of the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, EPSRC. So one can see Tim brings a wealth of experience across academia, research, innovation, and institutional leadership to his new position as Vice-Chancellor of the University of Liverpool. And we really are delighted to have him on board. So welcome, Tim, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Rasmita, thank you. Absolutely delighted to be joining you and for this conversation and also to be joining our alumni community. So really a great hello from me to all our alumni around the world. So thank you very much.
So yes, thank you, Tim. So we'll start with the conversation and we'll go on to the questions from our alumni. So let's start with some background. We've known each other a long time, but let me start with the Tim I never met, the fresh-faced undergraduate who arrived at the University of Liverpool to study chemistry. So I'm interested, what catalyzed young Tim's interest in science and why Liverpool?
Yeah, I think the science interest really goes back to inspirational school teaching, which I think is critically important for defining, the education aspiration of all young people. When I was very young, I had no particular desire or interest in being a scientist. I wasn't one of those people who thought that was my absolute career. But as I went through secondary school, I think I had some fabulous teachers, particularly when I did my A-levels. And the chemistry teacher in particular was really inspirational. He went the extra mile with me and others in the class. He showed us the applications of chemistry, how important it was to industry, to society, and that just captivated my interest, which is why in the end I decided to study chemistry. But it really does go back to inspirational teaching.
It always does, doesn't it? Yes.
It does indeed.
Same for me, yes. So why Liverpool? Why chemistry at Liverpool?
Yeah, I think it was very much, it was the open day. It came to the open day and, shown around the department, shown the facilities, but more importantly, again, the staff. The staff I met were, again, very, very enthusiastic and very inspirational. Again, they talked clearly about the course and what we would do, but they talked more broadly about the links to industry. In those days, in the 1980s, chemistry was two departments. There was a department of organic chemistry and there's a department of inorganic, physical and industrial chemistry. And the links with industry were really, really important. They still are, of course, with companies like Unilever, but in those days, there were companies like ICI and others. And I think in that open day, those links were very clearly explained and there were, that excited me. I was thinking about what I would do next in my career, ultimately, after being a student. And because at that point, I thought I would go into industry. So I think that was one thing. I think the second thing was on the tour of the campus, the tour of the Greenbank residences, which is where I actually ended up being a first-year student, the tour of the sports fields out at Wincote, all of which I visited recently and have brought back very many happy memories. But I think all of that really just sort of captivated me, and that informed my decision. It was in an era where there was very little information. There was no website, there's clearly no social media. You just had a paper prospectus, and you had to rely on the visit and the conversations you had when you met people.
Yes, really important, those open days, aren't they? And no pressure to the current staff, but, our future Vice-Chancellor could be coming on the next one. So yes, thank you. So after your degree in chemistry, your undergraduate degree in chemistry, you went on to do a PhD in surface science, also at Liverpool. This is an area, of course, close to my heart. And at that time, surface science was a very young, I would say even a rebellious scientific field. So I'm sure our audience would like to know what drove your interest in that area of research.
I'm going to sound quite boring, but it actually comes down to the inspiration of in this case, the academic staff who taught me. So Liverpool and the chemistry department in particular had a nucleus of really, really strong academic staff in the surface science area. I mean, there were others in physics as well, but I was exposed predominantly to the chemistry ones. So the head of department was Professor David King, who of course subsequently became government chief scientist and indeed more recently, the Chancellor of the University of Liverpool. There was Neville Richardson, Stephen Holloway, there were others in the department. And they brought the excitement of research into the teaching. So when I did, not so much in the first year, but certainly in the second year and third year, and particularly when you moved on into the research project phase, you started to get embedded in that research environment and that research community. And it was a really exciting time. You know, we had world leaders in the field at the university in the chemistry department. And again, that captivated my interest. There were other great areas in chemistry, which I thought were interesting, but it was that group and that environment that really stimulated my interest and ultimately, you know, why I decided to do a PhD.
You know, I remember that time very clearly. I'd arrived as a postdoc to work with David King, and I remember just how lively the scientific discussions were. You know, there wasn't any idea you could put forward or a hypothesis without really encountering huge challenge and scrutiny of that idea. And the passionate discussions, and I remember having them with you as well, you know, whether it was in the group meetings or in the tea room or in the Oxford pub across the road, you know, it really was an era where we were challenging not just the science in our field, but the thinking in other fields. And I wondered if that was your experience at the time as well.
Very much so. It was a real, as I said, really vibrant experience. And I think gradually you also got exposed to other disciplines. So there was strengths in physics, in material science, and in engineering. And gradually you built up that sort of interdisciplinary approach to the subject, which I think is also really valuable. And again, they brought the connections with industry into the research and into the teaching, because whether it be through catalysis in the chemicals industry, whether it be through semiconductors in the electronics industry, there's a whole range of applications that you could work towards. And much of the work was done in partnership with those companies. So yeah, it was a really exciting and a really vibrant time. And Liverpool was, and you would probably argue still is, a centre of excellence in surface science, not just in the UK, but internationally as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a lot to thank the people who pioneered that field for us when we arrived. Yes, indeed. So you embarked on a very successful career as an academic, and you had, you created a very active and international research profile. And so I just wanted to understand how your time at Liverpool helped you and shaped you in the career you took forward in your own research interests after leaving Liverpool.
Yeah, I think there are a number of things. I mean, firstly, I think the field itself, as you've said, was a sort of enabling field, really. There's a sort of intellectual discipline around it in terms of the techniques we use, the methods, the analysis, which you could then apply to a whole range of different other areas, different fields. And I think gradually, as I went through my career, I moved from quite fundamental science, very basic science and chemistry, all the way through to ultimately to working, as you said, in areas such as photovoltaics or solar cells, the electronic devices, and more generally. But I always retained that sort of intellectual rigor that I'd learned as a PhD student in surface science. So I could bridge the gap between basic science, fundamental science, and more applied science. And, ultimately I set up a spin-out company. I worked very closely with industry, but that was all underpinned by that basic science, very similar to your own career, actually, but in a different field. So I think that was really important, and surface science in effect was the start of nanoscience, which then became nanotechnology. And so, the role of surfaces and interfaces, they're so important in so many different fields, whether it be, in the physical sciences, in the biological sciences, or whatever. And I think surface science and the techniques and methods that have come from that have played a huge role in the development of that field. I mean, I think the other area really was the culture. You've touched on it yourself. There was that very vibrant culture where you basically you did what you thought was really interesting. You embarked on things. And I've always tried to do that as I went through my academic and particularly my research career, do things what I thought were really, really interesting, and not just do things because you're told to do them, if that makes sense. I think in research, you've got to follow your nose, follow your instincts, and push the boundaries. And again, I think that came from that early training in the surface science group here at Liverpool.
I think you're so right, because, you had to be inspired by what we were doing, because the science was so hard.
Yeah.
You remember fighting your equipment, and I was fighting mine downstairs, trying to get it to work, to get that signal. And we worked often late in the night, trying to collect data. And it was really, really hard science. And it was very different to chemistry. These were completely different types of techniques, and the field, had to, develop those techniques. The number of Nobel Prizes that have come into the field because of the techniques that have come out from this field, which have allowed us to, as you say, the pioneers of nanoscience. Because you can't do nanoscience if you can't see at the nano level, and you can't control at the nano level. And in that sense, the field then opened up so many different avenues. And I remember, and you remember this, there were a number of us from different universities who embarked on our scientific careers having had a PhD in surface science at about the same time. And you were one of the people who called a meeting called the future of surface science, because we were young. We were young at the time. In fact, a number of the people who are retiring, as ever, you always have people saying, "Oh, it's all done. There's no more to be done. I'm retiring. My brilliance is over, and this field is gone." And we stood there and said, "Well, where is the future of surface science?" You must remember that, and you must remember all the things that came out of it. Perhaps we can go back to that time a little bit, and what your impressions were of that meeting. 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, it was about 2 or 3 days. You're right. I think it was in the Cotswolds, if I remember rightly, the hotel there. We got some money from the EPSRC, actually, the funding.
Yeah, that's right.
We've got about 30 people, again, from a range of disciplines: chemistry, physics, material science, engineering, probably even in the biosciences by that stage as well. And each person, I remember, stood up and gave a short presentation, not on what they'd done in the past, but where they saw the future direction in their particular speciality. So, we covered everything, again, from catalysis to electronic materials to biosciences and so forth. And it was really exciting, actually. We had a couple of the older guard there to keep us on track, if I remember rightly. But it was great. It was great. And actually, you look at the careers of the people who were at that meeting, and many went on into very successful careers, were promoted to professors, heads of departments and so forth, and have done really well, but are now working in fields which you wouldn't necessarily connect with surface science. But again, they've used that underpinning to develop the career in the direction they wanted to go to. So yeah, I thought it was a great meeting at the time. And looking back, absolutely it was.
I'm just surprised how far-sighted we turned out to be, probably completely by chance. But, you're right, the fields, that people went into astrochemistry, astrophysics, biointerfaces, electrochemistry, new energy applications, and 2D materials and so on, and all came out from that little nucleus that met for that time. Just goes to show how much inspiration can be filled into a 3-day meeting. So you had a very successful career as an academic, and you touched on your photovoltaic work, but you had many research highlights. Pick one that you were really proud of.
It's hard to pick one, because there were several, but I think I'm going to pick the photovoltaic, the solar cell one, because because I think it's such a hugely important technology that the world needs and is progressing at a really fast pace. But B, it was also just really, for me, very scientifically very interesting. So again, it was in an area of organic solar cells, so molecular materials. So it built on that expertise in molecular assembly. It required devices which were just on sort of nanometers thick, so very, very thin devices. So the surfaces and interfaces were so important. But ultimately, we were making devices, and I was actually trying to develop a technology called plastic solar cells. So these were for portable solar cells, very lightweight solar cells, which we developed in collaboration with some industrial companies. And then, as I said, we did establish a spin-out company to exploit them. The spin-out company wasn't the greatest success, so there's some failure there. But I think we were close. We had some successes out of it, and there's always the chances of success are small with spin-outs. But I think it was that learning curve going from the fundamental science all the way through, ultimately to exploitation of intellectual property. And actually, a number of my PhD students in particular, who then working in that field, have gone on to very, very successful careers in that and related industries as a result. So I think that's probably the highlight.
But it still remains a field that requires so much fundamental science still to be developed.
It does.
It hasn't all been done. And so very interesting to hear your story on that. Okay, let me move slightly differently, in a different direction. So I'm sure you had many dreams when you were a student at the University of Liverpool. But did you ever imagine you return one day to lead the university as its Vice-Chancellor?
No. Very simple answer, actually. I mean, no, absolutely not. I mean, funnily enough, I got asked this question at Q&A in the staff forum. And my first answer, and I still hold to this, if you'd have asked me as an undergraduate student, would I be a Vice-Chancellor? My first response would be, what does a Vice-Chancellor do? I didn't know. And actually, I didn't care, which is probably quite a good thing, I think, for many of our students. But, you know, joking aside, I didn't have, even when I was a PhD student and I embarked on my early academic career, I was fixated on my academic work, on the research, which you've really got to be quite obsessive about, actually, if you're going to be successful. And whilst academic leadership was certainly on my sort of, potential career trajectory, that was the limit. I was keen and ultimately did run research centres and do departmental roles. But I didn't have any desire or indeed, any thought that I would one day be a Vice-Chancellor, let alone be a Vice-Chancellor at the University of Liverpool. And actually, there are very few Vice-Chancellors who return to their alma mater. I mean, very few. I actually looked around the Russell Group. So there's 24 universities in the Russell Group. And I think there's only one other Vice-Chancellor who did their degree at the university they're now Vice-Chancellor at. So it is very, very unusual. So it's a great privilege, actually, and a great honor to have been selected to come back, actually, because of that. So.
And I know it's such a full-time job to do, to be a Vice-Chancellor or to lead an institution. But I just want to explore, you made the transition from academic leadership to institutional leadership. And we know, and perhaps we don't talk about it enough in science, but we are driven by passion and we are driven by a love for the subject. And it is it's a creative, all-consuming activity. How did you break away from the passion that I know you had for your subject to move into institutional leadership?
Yeah, it wasn't an easy transition, and it wasn't an obvious transition. I mean, for 20 years or so, it absolutely wasn't on my agenda, as I've said previously. And I'd sort of done the academic leadership and enjoyed the academic leadership, but I certainly enjoyed doing the research still. And then it was whilst I was at Warwick, it was the Vice-Chancellor at Warwick who gradually got me to start do more institutional type things. Mm-hmm. And I actually started finding them very interesting. Maybe it was just the right time that I wanted a new challenge. I was told I was good at what I was doing. I felt I could bring people along with me, inspire and do things in interesting ways. And so gradually I sort of ended up doing more and more institutional roles. And then I became Pro-Vice-Chancellor and various other roles. And for a while I was trying to juggle the two things, which in the end is ultimately impossible, because I think if you're going to be really successful at research, you can't do it as a part-time role. Mm-hmm. And I realized that at some point that was going, I had to make a decision. I either went back to being an academic, or I then tried to continue in my leadership trajectory, and I chose the latter. And it was the move to Birmingham that finally made that decision, because when I became provost, I essentially then had to give up academic work. I couldn't move my lab from Warwick to Birmingham. That wouldn't be justified. So I basically gave everything away and graduated my last PhD student. I graduated 50 PhD students, and my last one was just before I left Warwick and moved to Birmingham. But it was a difficult transition. It was a difficult decision. Took place over several years. I'm glad I've made it, but not easy. And I suspect lots of people face that challenge. I think one of the hardest things is, as an academic researcher, you go from being an obsessive expert, or world leading expert, hopefully, in your field, but in a very, very narrow thing. And then suddenly in a, Vice-Chancellor or a big leadership role, you're not an expert really in anything. You're representing a very, very broad institution with so many different disciplines and interests and stakeholders.
Indeed.
And that transition is an interesting one.
We'll come to that in a minute, but an open invitation to you, Tim. Anytime you feel the itch to do a bit of surface nanoscience, come over and we'll work together.
I'm not sure I could be trusted in a lab anymore.
Oh, we won't let you touch anything, don't worry. They don't let me touch the instruments now either, the students. Yeah. So let's come back to the point you finished on, is you now lead a university, which is a large and complex organization. What leadership attributes do you think are important and essential for this job?
I think there are several. I think first of all, you have to be able to be able to grasp that complexity and accept that you're not going to know the detail of everything. You can't. But you have to have a very quickly grasp everything at a level where you're comfortable with it and you can talk about it. You're representing the the university does everything from veterinary and medical sciences all the way through to history and politics and so forth. It's a huge spectrum of academic disciplines, and of course the stakeholders we have are enormous, both locally, nationally, and internationally. And you have to be able to represent the university and talk about the university in all of those environments and be comfortable with that. So you have to master a very, very wide brief in a very, very quick, short period of time. I think that's one thing. I think you have to be able, first of all, you need to build a good team around you, because leadership is distributed. It's not about an individual. You need a good team, not just our senior leadership team, but more broadly across the institution, across our academic schools and departments and the professional services. And you need to be able to empower people and trust people to do things and make decisions. Leadership isn't about one person. You set the tone and the culture, but you need others to operate as leaders. And then I think you have to have an ability to balance the need for sort of strategic decision making. So you have to make decisions and balance that with the need to be inclusive and consult and engage. And that can be a delicate balance. Sometimes you need to make quite quick decisions. Other times you can consult for longer and engage for longer. But you always got to have your door open and listen to other people's ideas and inputs before you make most of the decisions. Some decisions you have to make very quickly, but the majority you can listen and learn. And take people with you. I mean, I think that the final point, you've got to inspire. You've got to take people with you. We're currently about to develop a new strategy for the university, and that will be a university strategy. It's not the Vice-Chancellor strategy. So we need to make sure people buy into it, that they're proud of it, that they can see what's in it for them. And that's about really carrying people with you on the journey. So those are the sorts of attributes that I think are important.
So one of your jobs as Vice-Chancellor is horizon scanning, looking at opportunities, looking at challenges. So I wanted to ask you, what do you see as the main challenges facing the university sector as a whole over the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, well, several. I think the funding of universities is going to be a big issue, particularly in a period where the economy is not just in the UK but elsewhere in the world is under pressure. The way education is funded, I think, is becoming very problematic and contentious in many countries, not just the UK. So I think that whole funding model for universities is going to be important. I think for UK universities which have traditionally and are very, very strong and world-renowned, I think the competition around the world is getting more and more intense, particularly in Southeast Asia, for example, where there's been huge investments in universities. And so, we're all basically trying to attract the best talent, the best students, the best staff. We want to do the best teaching. We want to do the best research. So we've got to make sure that we have that reputation and that quality so that we can maintain and grow our position within that competition. I mean, I think the third threat or challenge is I suppose we've lived in a world which has been quite populist, and I think institutions and universities, our institutions, have been under threat from that populism. I think governments, UK and internationally, have increasingly wanted to control what universities do. And I think that's something we should resist fiercely. We're, in the UK, we're autonomous institutions, and we should be proud of that autonomy. It's really important for us as institutions. So I think we've just got to be guarded against that threat that is still there and will probably exist as we go forward. I guess the final thing is the technology, artificial intelligence. How does that impact us as an institution, as a sector, and indeed how does it impact on society more broadly? I mean, that's both a challenge and an opportunity, but I think there's quite a few unknowns that we really don't know about, but it could well have a seismic effect in the longer term, and we need to make sure we understand that and can grasp it in the right way.
Yeah, indeed. And when you look at the research power of one single university like ours, if you look at and you have talked about the different disciplines, the experts you can bring together, within 10 minutes around the universities, it's an incredible knowledge base that exists within our universities. And these are places where you have independent thought, but this is where the new science and the new technology is going to come out. At least that's my feeling.
It is, and actually, it's not just the science and technology. We have great social sciences and great humanities as well. That's the beauty about a comprehensive university like ours. We cover that broad set of disciplines, and actually, the linkages between those different areas, I think, is going to be increasingly important. So it's not about working in silos; it's about genuinely doing interdisciplinary work that can have a very positive impact on society.
Indeed. So let us talk about our university. It's a civic university sitting within a city that is known for its independence of thought and the ferocity of its spirit, and a city that has ambitions for its people. What are your ambitions for this university, regionally and internationally?
Well, the ambitions are high in both, because I think both are really important to the university. So as you say, this university is an anchor institution in the city, a really important institution to the city. I've been struck in my first 7 weeks in my conversations with city leaders how important we are to the city, to the economy, to the social fabric, to the health sector, and so forth, to the cultural sector. And we must grow that and continue to do that. So we're really, and actually what I see is so many people contributing to that around the university. It's a really positive element of what we do. But equally, we are a global university. We're global in terms of the students' population, in terms of our staff population, in terms of our alumni community, in terms of the partnerships, the research networks that we have, the collaborations that we have overseas. And we want to grow that as well. So I think they're both really, really important. And actually, to me, the great strength of the university should be the connections between the two. They're not exclusive. So we need to demonstrate to the city the importance of our internationalization, actually. And the classic example to me is the work that was done in the pandemic. Everybody says, both internally, if we go in the city or indeed nationally, actually, ministers will say how good the work in Liverpool was. And obviously the university was pivotal to that, working with a whole range of partners in the city. Fantastic work that benefited the city of Liverpool and actually the nation. But of course, that expertise comes about largely because of the research power and quality, most of which, of course, is done overseas in infectious diseases. So that internationalization of the research and that ability to attract the very best researchers was then, used to really aid the city in terms of its response to the pandemic. So that link between the global and the local, I think, was really important. And that's really a really good example of how the two are connected. And you could pick up many areas where that can and should be the case.
I think it picks up, on your point of interdisciplinarity, nature doesn't work along discipline lines. You have to cut across the disciplines in terms of subject area, but you have to cut across disciplines of town and gown from country to country, because all the science we do is international and always has been and always will be. That's and this is where the best science is nurtured, and I'm sure it's true across all the other areas the university is known for. So Tim, you've been in position for all of 2 months. And as you walk around Liverpool, what are your impressions of our city?
I think the city has been transformed. If you walk along the dock area, along the waterfront, it is so different to when I was here 30 years ago. It's a really vibrant place to be, full of great cultural assets, museums, galleries. It's got the conference centres, it's got hotels, it's got bars, it's got restaurants, and it's a hugely popular destination actually in terms of the tourist economy, the weekends in particular. But you can walk away from there. You've got the shopping centre in Liverpool One. That whole area is completely transformed. And then, you come up towards the university, you've got the Knowledge Quarter, which is this area that encompasses our university, but also Liverpool John Moores, the Tropical School of Medicine, and other, the hospitals and other big organisations. And that has become a very vibrant community, a very vibrant part of the knowledge economy. Indeed. Which is valued greatly by the Liverpool City region, by the mayor and by the politicians, and that's only going to grow. And you see a lot of the developments around here that we've got on the Knowledge Quarter. I think that transformation has really been significant, but I think will continue in the next decade as well. So the city's transformed, I think, and is really vibrant.
Absolutely. So my last question, Tim. So Liverpool is a city famed for its music, its poetry, its theatre, and its football. Do you share any of these passions?
I think you know the answer to this one. I do. I mean, I'm probably obsessive about football, but not associated with the city of Liverpool. I tell everybody I'm neutral in Liverpool. I'm a Mancunian by background. So I confess to being a Manchester City supporter, but I was, of my childhood, and I've retained that. But I love football, and this city loves football. I mean, you can't go anywhere without a conversation about football. And I was very honoured to be asked to go. Was it last week? Yeah, last Monday to the Merseyside derby at Anfield, actually, as a neutral. But I enjoyed the occasion. So yes, football, absolutely. But I've always enjoyed music. I've always enjoyed theatre. When I was here many years ago, I was a regular at the Liverpool Philharmonic, actually. Went many times, and I intend, when I have time, to go again. And I also want to go to some of the theatres and really use some of the, experience a lot of the cultural assets that this city has, which is significant. I just need the time to be able to do it, but I will find time, absolutely.
And I can vouch for your Man City supporter, because I remember you being a Man City supporter when they were being relegated and through hard times, and while my head had been turned entirely by Johnny Barnes and Liverpool. So I do remember that. So thank you, Tim. It's been so interesting talking to you. And I'll now pass on to Susie, who I believe is armed with lots of questions from our alumni. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Susie.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Rosmita. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. And I am indeed. We've had questions coming in ahead of time as well. So we've got some in the chat box. Please do keep putting your questions in. We may not get through them all, so apologies in advance if you have a question in there and we don't get to you. Rosmita answered half of the question that came in, Tim, but I'm going to ask you the other half of the question that came in because we didn't quite get that. So one of the questions ahead of time was, what are your main ambitions for the university? Tick, we've done that one. And if you could implement one new thing to the university, what would it be?
Confidence. So I think the university and I think the city still lacks the confidence that it should have. It's a wonderful university. We've got fantastic things going on across the university, but I don't think we shout enough about them. I don't think we tell people enough about how good we are in the right way. You don't want to be arrogant about these things, but I think we need to be much more confident. We need to be much more outward focused and make sure that people around the country and indeed around the world know what we're really good at, what's important to us. So I think more confidence, greater confidence is what I hope I can inject. You've heard me say it in various fora around the university in the last few weeks, and I think people want to be more confident actually. And so that would be a quick injection if we could do that.
Thanks, Tim. My name's Andy. I'm also looking after the questions from the audience. Another one we had in advance was, what do you think makes the University of Liverpool stand out from other universities, particularly those of our rivals?
Do you mean rivals in terms of local rivals or more broadly?
Yeah, I think this was Russell Group and local rivals as well.
Well, the key thing is we have particular specializations. We're a comprehensive university, but we don't do all disciplines, and we have particular strengths within disciplines that are unique to Liverpool. So, I've already talked about the work that we do in infectious diseases and how that impacted on the pandemic. Liverpool is world leading, the university, and also, of course, the relationship with the tropical school. And people know that. And that whilst we're good at all sorts of areas of medical sciences and health sciences, that is one particular area where we really stand out. In the chemistry, the sort of the physics area, there's the materials side. We have the materials innovation factory, which is again a world-leading facility, and the people in it are right at the top of the field. And again, if you go around the world, people would know about that. They would recognize that as being truly unique and world-leading. So I think we've got areas. So we've got lots of great strengths, but we've got areas where we're particularly strong, when you compare them to our competitors. I mean, if I compare us to our city universities, I mean, we're the only research intensive university in the city, and that differentiates us from other universities who do great things but don't have a strong focus on research. And that research, of course, informs our education. It goes back to some of the things I said right at the beginning, actually, about what inspires people. But it's also the research that then helps to transform the economy, transforms society, transforms the healthcare system, and so forth. So it's that research quality, that research intensity, that research breadth that sets us apart from many organizations, certainly in this particular region. So I hope that answers the question.
So thank you very much. We've had a question come in from Kieran McBride, and Kieran, forgive me, I'm going to ask one of your questions and then we'll follow up with you afterwards about the second part of your question, just for the sake of time and getting through everybody's questions. But the first one, Tim, is it was university, so Kieran, I should say, is a master's student currently studying law with us, and following Sustainability Week, how do you intend to improve the university's sustainability policies? So a little bit on your thoughts about sustainability, please.
Yeah, so obviously we have a sustainability strategy that was launched recently, actually just before I came. So but certainly something we're very committed to, and I'm very committed to. And as part of the new institutional strategy, sustainability will be a really important theme within it. So first of all, to make sure it's elevated so that people understand the importance of what we want to do, and then embedding it within the university so that we can look at areas where we can make hopefully some fairly rapid advances. There's a lot of work, for example, about waste at the moment and how and reducing our waste, and I think those sorts of things we can do quite quickly. But then there are longer term things. We have a challenge of quite an old, large campus. Making that net zero is going to be a big challenge and will cost a lot of money, but we're putting together the roadmap so we can at least embark on that journey and have a plan to get to that point. So I think, there'll be a lot of work around it. It will be embedded within our strategy and what we do, and therefore will be treated as a priority that it has to be. So hopefully that addresses that question.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Tim. I have another question from someone called Hewad, who is currently living in Liverpool and originally from Afghanistan. They have a number of ideas about refugee education at the moment, and Hewad, we will follow up with you afterwards to have a discussion about this. So I'll leave you in my email address and we can follow on afterwards. But Tim, we just had a question. What's your kind of views on refugee education at the moment, and how can the University of Liverpool and other institutions kind of help with refugees and their educations?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do some, as other universities do, and we work with organisations such as CARA, which is to sort of help academic people from refugees. So we will continue to do more on that where we can. And work with other organisations to help that. So yes, we will continue to do so.
Thank you very much. We've had a question coming in from Nick. How are you going to promote innovation? Huge topic. He talks about industry links. How are you going to promote innovation?
It's, well, again, because it will be front and center of our strategy. So again, that's important, so that it places the importance in what we're going to do. We are, I mean, there's all sorts of, we're building stronger links with industry, with a range of different companies. We're trying to promote things like the science park and build the science park capacity, so we can start to develop more spin outs. We can also help the SME community. I'm very keen on promoting greater entrepreneurship with students. We've got 27,000 students. Many of those will be entrepreneurial and will be innovative, and we need to find ways of allowing them to thrive. We do some good work in that, but I think we could do more. And I will work and do what I can to work with the city region and with the investment community, so that we can try and bring in funding, so that we can promote the innovation agenda and elevate it. So I think there's a whole range of things, but I will certainly be, it's going to be front and central of our strategy. It's very important to me. It's been in my previous roles, and I think it's very important to the university. We've got some great examples of it, and I think we've got some great people who are very innovative. I think we've just got to empower people to continue to be more innovative, and we will do so.
That's great. Thanks, Tim. A question we had in as well. I think we were discussing before the meeting that we've got alumni in 171 countries across the world now, and we've had a question asking if you plan on visiting anyone internationally in your first kind of year in the job.
Yes, I do. In fact, I am due to visit, and Susie will know this, due to visit Hong Kong in April, soon after Easter, and certainly a part of that will be to visit the alumni community there. And I am also scheduled, I've got a trip to the United States in early summer. And again, alumni community will be part of that visit as well. So they're the first two, but there will be other things as well. Obviously, there's a limit to how often I can travel to do things, but I certainly intend to engage with alumni wherever I travel, actually. It's a very important part of my role. And it's really important that relationship is as strong as it can possibly be.
Thank you very much. A similar question, but I think perhaps asked by a student, saying, how do you intend to continue our support of international students? And are there any new things that you are planning to put in place for our international student community?
I mean, to answer the first one, we will absolutely continue to support international students. And you know, I've not been here that long to know what we do well and what we don't do well. So I'm open to suggestions. But I know the team is keen to do more, actually, to support international students. You know, I think there's various things. I think there's things around, I'm particularly interested in about employability. So we work a lot on employability for UK students, but I'm not sure we do that much, for example, for international students. And that might be something to explore and do more. I think parts of the campus could be made more attractive for international students, to represent the diversity of students and staff, actually, who are on our campus, to make it more interesting and relevant to them. So I think there's a whole range of things we could explore, but I have only been here 7.5 weeks, and I don't know enough yet about what we do well and what we don't do well, but it's certainly on the agenda. It will be on the agenda, but we will absolutely want to support international students as best as we possibly can.
Thank you, Tim. That kind of leads us nicely on to our next question, which is from a recent graduate who's asking, it's a particularly challenging environment for people coming out of university at the moment, and have you got any particular advice for how they can stand out in the marketplace at such a challenging time?
Yeah, no, and I'm sure it is very challenging, and I appreciate that. I mean, fortunately, I hope the fact that you've got a University of Liverpool degree helps you stand out, and the things that you've learned and from your time here, both, you know, in terms of your academic journey, but also in terms of the broader experience. And I hope that helps you stand out. You know, I think ultimately persevere. You know, you will have, all students who come from this university are very talented. And, you know, don't despair. There will be good jobs out there. There's a demand for really talented, skilled people. who can be the future, future leaders in a whole range of different areas. But I hope that what you've learned, people have learned at the university, helps you stand out from others. That should be our aim, to make sure, we talk about transforming people's lives so that they can then develop their careers. And I hope that is what we do, and we will strive to do even more of that for the next generation as well.
Thank you. Do you think that your scientific background will have a positive effect in scientific funding for the university? Do you think that will make a difference?
Well, I can't. I mean, fundamentally, the scientific funding is generated by our academics who work in science, and they're the ones who write the grants, and it's based on their quality, not on what I do. But obviously, I will do what I can in the circles I operate to try and influence where funding goes. I will have some influence, not on the individual grants, but on some of the larger scale things that flow through the city region, through some of government funding that's not allocated to projects. And I will certainly use that, not just in science, but more broadly, to attract as much money as we possibly can to support, that research community, our research community, and make sure we can do even better things. And the links with industry, I'll do what I can there as well to help promote funding from different sources, so we can diversify the funding streams. So I will certainly be working hard to do what I can, but ultimately, individual grants are down to the academic community.
Thanks, Tim. Another question from a graduate. What would a successful first year in the job look like for you?
I think, successful first year would be, we'd have our strategy agreed, we'd be very clear what the direction of travel was, what our ambition was, what our aspiration was, and more importantly, we'll have the ingredients in place to start delivering it, whether that's in education, whether that's in research, whether it's our civic regional engagement, whether it's our international engagement, whether it's on sustainability and so forth. So I think, a big part of this year is making sure that that is in place, and that we have people committed to it, and we have the substance behind it. So we have the plans behind it that we can start to really move in the direction that we want to do. And I think if we can achieve that, I'll be quite satisfied at the end of year one.
Very good. Just a word of warning to Andy, I think we'll probably have to make this the final 3 questions, because I know that we have to get the Vice-Chancellor away absolutely bang on 6 o'clock. So we will start to ask you our final few questions now, Tim. And it's one that's come in ahead of time, slightly cheeky one, maybe. What skills are you bringing to the university that you think are going to help move us forward?
That's a good question. Well, I talked in my answers to Razmita's question about leadership, and hopefully those are the sorts of things that are relevant. I mean, I've got a lot of experience of leadership in different roles at institutions that are quite similar to Liverpool, so Birmingham, Warwick in particular. So I hope that is a great benefit, and those skills will cross a diverse range of portfolios, in effect, whether it be research, whether it be innovation, whether it be actually on planning and budget setting for universities, whether it be on capital program and so forth. But I think my ability to lead and hopefully inspire staff, students, members of the university community, so that we can achieve what we set out to do and our ambitions, and elevate that confidence. I hope I can bring people with me on that journey. So those are the sorts of skills. It was the sorts of things I answered to Razmita's question, I think, which will be the relevant skills.
Thank you, Tim. And a final question, if I may. And just before I go into the final question, we've had some nice feedback for you from Chris, who says, when I was an undergraduate at Liverpool almost 60 years ago, the Vice-Chancellor was a distant figure who was unknown. I've inspired your vibrancy and willingness to be seen, acting positively for the benefits of the university. I'm sure the university will benefit from your leadership, and he wishes you well. So thank you for that nice feedback, Chris. And the final question, if I may, is, you spoke a bit before about your kind of scientific career highlights. I wonder if you have an overall career highlight that you could share with us as a finishing question.
That's a tough one. I think Probably, that's a good one. When I was at Birmingham, we have this exercise in the UK called the Research Excellence Framework, or REF. People may or may not have heard of it, but it's a very important exercise for determining, assessing the quality of university research. It runs about every 7 years. So it's a big, very important exercise for the reputation of all universities. And the results of REF came out last year, and Liverpool did very well, actually. I don't take any credit for that. I wasn't here, but that was great credit to the institution. But when I was in Birmingham also did very, very well. And I think probably when the results came, that was a big piece of work that many people contributed to. But I think, part of the role as provost was really to promote that research culture and that research confidence and the investment that had to go into it. And the result was really, really positive. And I think, importantly, the impact of that result on the university community, people really, that gave them the confidence, actually. I mean, people were so pleased with what came out of that. And I think it was that response that was so important to the institution. And I'm sure similar things happened here last year. But I can take some credit for what happened at Birmingham, certainly not all the credit, but I think that was quite a proud moment in my career, actually.
Thank you, Tim. That's great. And that brings us to the end of our event for this evening. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone who's participated with their questions and attending as well, wherever you are across the globe. This is a series of events. So our next one will hopefully be in June. We've got an exciting list of targets for our graduate list. So we'll be announcing the next event in due course. I wanted to say a huge thank you as well to Rasmita for being such a fantastic host this evening, and to our new Vice-Chancellor as well. Tim, I think it's been a great way of getting to know you a bit better for the graduate community. Thank you so much for answering the questions so honestly and openly as well. It's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm sure our audience members have as well. So thank you so much, Tim, and we wish you all the best in your new role. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.